Does it ever feel like nothing will grow where you live because it's simply too cold and you have such a short growing season? Are you completely new to gardening in zone 3 and you just have no idea what to grow? Or maybe it feels like plant life begins at zone 5 or higher. If you're looking for help with any of those things, you're in the right place. My name is Kristen, and I am the gardener and writer behind the Zone 3 gardening blog, Shifting Roots. If you're gardening in a cold climate, and especially if you're really interested in flowers and perennials, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification button. So now let's get to the good stuff. Here are 20 of my favorite perennials that you can plant in your garden. First, let's talk about cut flowers. Some of my favorites are Asiatic lilies, peonies, and delphiniums. All of these flowers produce really big show-stopping blooms, and they all have slightly different bloom times. The first ones, peonies, will come around the end of June, beginning of July, depending on the year. They're very fragrant and beautiful. And the only unfortunate thing is that when you first plant a peony, it takes about 3 years before that peony will actually bloom for you and look the way you're hoping it will look. Next, delphiniums are great in your landscape as a really tall flower, and they look fantastic as a cut flower as well. They're a beautiful hue of blue. You can also get them in white, pink, and shades of purple. Asiatic lilies are so easy to grow. You basically set them in the ground and forget about them. They come in a wide array of colors: yellows, oranges, pinks, reds, whites, any sort of variation in between, and they are a lovely surprise at the beginning to middle, and even some of them at the end of July. And finally, I also personally really like yarrow as a cut flower. I know some gardeners in zone 3 think that yarrow is a bit of a nuisance flower, and it has grown in my grass on occasion, but I absolutely love it. It lasts a long time and is super easy and reliable to grow. Now let's move on to the spring bloomers. The spring blooming flowers that I love the most in zone 3 are tulips, daffodils, and lilacs. Now you don't have to go with the plain old yellow and red boring tulips. There are so many different tulip varieties that you can get. If you follow any sort of cut flower farmer on Instagram, they will often have sales with really pretty bougie varieties in the fall that you can get. Daffodils can also be purchased. You don't have to do the plain yellow ones. You can get lovely apricot shades, white, cream, different variations, doubles. So just think outside of the plain old daffodil box. And finally, with the lilacs, I just love the old tried and true varieties in either white, purple, or dark purple, and they're very, very fragrant. You can get the newer varieties that maybe don't spread so much as the older varieties. However, they just don't smell quite the same. As for fall blooming varieties, I absolutely love cone flowers. Here we can grow Heliopsis, Echinacea, and Rudbeckia. They're a fantastic addition to the garden because they last a long time. You'll see them bloom for usually around a month, even up to like 6 weeks, and they're fantastic for those late summer and fall flowers. Speaking of fall, I also love goldenrod. A lot of times in zone 3, you'll see goldenrod growing in the ditch, but if you can find some to put in your yard, they're absolutely wonderful and look beautiful in bouquets as well. Speaking of cut flowers and perennials, if you are really struggling with creating your beautiful perennial landscape, I specifically have written an ebook and a system to help you design your own landscape and make it just easy as possible. With this system, you'll have something blooming in spring, summer, and fall, and I have plenty of templates, and it's just super easy for you. It looks like this, and I'll put a link for you in the description. Now I can hear some of you, I bet you're wondering, hey, what about me? I don't have a bunch of sun, Kristen, and everything you've said is for full sun. Well, let's talk about shade-loving plants. So some of the shade-loving plants that grow really well here are Bergenia, which is actually, it likes the sun, but it looks fantastic and works in almost any type of soil condition. And it's also one of the first flowers to bloom in the spring, which is really nice. Next is the bleeding hearts. They're so easy to grow and they come in both pink and white colors, and of course have that lovely little heart shape to them. And finally, everybody except me love hostas and ferns. Personally, I find hostas and ferns a little boring because they're just in a bunch of shades of green, but you know what? So many of my readers absolutely love hostas and ferns, and they are simply one of the easiest things to grow. If you grow ferns, just make sure that you don't get the ostrich variety, as that one can kind of run away from you. I also have a post that I'll link down below of 28 plants that you definitely want to consider not planting here, just because they can sometimes get away from you, especially if you're a new gardener and you're just not willing to put in the work or the time you need to take some of those plants that might be, a little bit promiscuous, so take them out of the soil. Now let's talk about a few of my favorite perennials. First up is Blazing Star Liatris. I love Blazing Star Liatris because once it's established, it doesn't require a lot of watering. It has some really nice tall purple or white spiky flowers. In a landscape, it just looks really interesting and is a nice contrast to all of your other blooms. Next, I want to talk about a perennial you might not have heard of, and it's called the globe flower or trollius. The globe flower trollius grows best in sort of a little more a wet location in the yard, and it has these beautiful flowers that look somewhat like a ranunculus. They come in yellow and orange, and if you can get your hands on one, they're an absolute stunner in late spring. Speaking of those perennials that flower in late spring and early summer, that reminds me of another one of my favorites, columbine. Columbine has these really pretty bell-like flowers, and I always kind of imagine that they're little fairy skirts. Maybe that's a bit silly, but it's what I imagine. They come in a wide variety of colors, in pinks, purples, reds, whites, yellows, and they're really gorgeous, and you should absolutely add one to your landscape. Finally, let's wrap it up with my favorite vine and my favorite ground cover. For a vine, I absolutely love clematis. It's very well behaved, it looks beautiful, and it also has these lovely blue flowers that really look nice up your trellises. It blooms sort of in our late spring to early summer and is a wonderful addition to your garden. And finally, for a ground cover, I really enjoy rockfoil. I see it absolutely everywhere in my neighborhood. It looks good. It blooms for about a month. You get these lovely little yellow flowers, and even once the blooms are done, the green foliage looks so nice, and it's great for if you have a spot with some rocks or underneath a tree, and it'll fill it out without going crazy. So there are so many more than these 20 different perennials that I've shared with you that work well in zone 3. I'm also going to link in this post down below 53 different perennials that lots of different gardeners really love and plant in their yards. And if you're not in zone 3 and you're watching, don't worry, many of these perennials will also work for you. And zone 2, friends, almost everything in the list will work for you as well. Usually seed companies and the testing places don't often test down to zone 2 just because there's not as many of us to buy, but almost anything that grows in zone 3 will generally be fine in zone 2. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it really helpful. Now head on over to the next video and learn some more about zone 3 gardening.